Hi guys, it's Miss Eglin here with Middle School Language Arts. Today I'm going to be reading an excerpt from They Croaked by Georgia Bragg, illustrated by Kevin O'Malley, and it is about the awful ends of the awfully famous. And this episode is going to be about Charles Dickens, since we're reading the play version of A Christmas Carol. So this is the picture in the front of Dickens. It's an illustration. And I'm going to read it, and I'm going to talk about some of the questions that we're going to do next week. Okay, so the title is A Tale of Two Brains. And Charles Dickens was a writer. He was born in England in 1812, and he died 1870 at 58 years old, and we're going to find out how. And I'm going to try to zoom in on this if I can so you can see. It was the best of times for Charles Dickens, the richest, most famous author in the 1800s. But it was the worst of times for anyone who knew him. Dickens was incredibly talented, but he was also a moody, dirt-phobic control freak. People described him as a human hurricane. He explained sitting down to work as writing my head off. Dickens felt like his head was coming off because he had a torrential chemical imbalance going on beneath his comb-over. It fueled his art, but it ruined every relationship he had. It wasn't his fault, and it's not what killed him. Blood flow log jams in his brain ultimately left him as dead as a doornail. And we should know that is based on the first paragraph of A Christmas Carol, when they're talking about Marley being as dead as a doornail. At 12 years old, Dickens had a full-time job pasting labels on jars. By 17, he was a court reporter writing in shorthand. After he quit that job and became a real writer, though, the word short never described anything Dickens wrote. Dickens walked 10 to 20 miles every day before he sat down to write anything. Without spell check or a delete button, it was tough being a writer back then. Dickens had to stop to dip a goose feather quill into a jar of ink every couple of sentences, but nothing stopped him from writing a lot and very fast. He published his first story at 21, and by the time he was 25, he was a successful and admired author. Ebenezer Scrooge from the novel A Christmas Carol is his most famous character. Scrooge is a mean, stingy person who doesn't like children. Dickens didn't have to do much research to get Scrooge just right. Dickens never said anything nice about his wife, Catherine. He considered his 10 children to be disappointing, expensive, and messy. If a chair was out of place during his daily inspection of their rooms, the wrath of Daddy Dickens was wacko. The kids were scared whenever he was around. Dickens gave them nicknames like Flaster Flobby and Chicken Stalker. The kids' nicknames for Dad could have been Shut Your Word Hole or Get Over Yourself. But Dickens never got over himself. He burned 20 years worth of letters he'd received, especially the ones about forcing his wife to leave their house and refusing to let the kids see her family ever again, because he only thought his side of any story was important. And as if he didn't already have enough dominance over everybody, he learned how to hypnotize people. When he got older, Dickens traveled all over England and America by train, dramatizing his stories in theaters and playing all the characters himself. On performance days, he'd drink rum for breakfast, sherry and champagne for lunch, and then more alcohol for dinner. With all that liquor to drink, who couldn't play all the characters? But didn't Dickens have trouble just playing himself? Sometimes he would collapse onto his left side in excruciating pain. He had kidney stones, crystallized urine, that inched their way through his urinary tract and were about as painful to pass as giving birth to a ball of barbed wire. The prescription of the time was to hop on a horse and shake them loose. If that didn't work, to drink a broth made from boiling baby animals. Other times, Dickens' left arm wouldn't go where he wanted it to, and it hurt so much he had to wear it in a sling. Then, there were times when he could see only the right side of a room or words on the right side of a piece of paper, but not the left. Still, other times, Dickens walked in circles when he wanted to walk straight. Dickens' doctor did a blood removal treatment called cupping to try to get him to quit circling around. The doctor used a tool called a scarificator, I think, with spring-loaded blades. He punched it down on Dickens' skin to cut evenly spaced gashes. Avoiding a tendon or a vein was important. A glass cup with a suction bulb on top was placed over the freshly punctured skin. While air was sucked out of the cup, blood burbled out through the gashes. The doctor scooped up the blood and then made new crosswise cuts on the same spot to get even more blood. A cupping session left a field of bright red welts that lasted weeks. Things got worse when Dickens had paralysis of the motor functions of his left leg. After a while, the big toe on his lame leg got huge. It was gout, an excruciatingly painful disease people get from living too large on rich food and alcohol. The pain of gout feels something like a shark taking a bite out of your toe. Okay, so for those of us who did the Expedition Dickens Christmas VR experience know that the Dickenses did have a lot of cakes, and we know they had a pretty nice house. So I'm wondering, why did the author include that in the article? What does that tell us about Dickens? But Dickens's doctors thought all his problems were caused by too many bumpy train rides. They told him to stop performing, and his manager shortened the engagement tour. But no one got away with telling Dickens what to do. He told off his manager, throwing a raging fit that no one ever forgot. Even though he was partially paralyzed, walking in circles, and unable to see half of what he was looking at, Dickens was still able to write, no problem. That's because different parts of the brain do different things. If the left side of the body isn't working, it's the right side of the brain that's got a problem. The part of Dickens's brain that made up stories was working just fine. He never had creative paralysis. Still touring, Dickens would show off, bow, wait for more applause, and limp off stage and collapse. Now he kept a doctor, whom he didn't listen to, in the wings of every show. When he forgot how to say Pickwick Papers, the name of his first book, his doctor finally told him to go home. When Dickens returned, the house was all but empty. One unmarried daughter still lived at home, but the rest had already left. His wife had moved away 15 years before, not that he cared. His wife's sister had stayed behind, though, most likely because she was on his payroll. One night at dinner, Dickens jibber-jabbered a bunch of words that didn't fit together. His word magic was gone. Then he fell to the floor. The other part of his brain was shutting down. He was cold and didn't budge all night. The doctors came and tried to warm him up with hot bricks. Charles Dickens died that night, June 9th, 1870. He was 58 years old. Dickens' human hurricane personality would now be diagnosed as manic depressive illness. I think now they call it bipolar. It's a disorder that never gets better on its own. With the proper medication, it's manageable today for millions of people. His doctors didn't understand it at the time, but his left side didn't work because he had had what is known today as a stroke. Dickens had many strokes. Uncontrollable bleeding in Dickens's brain is what killed him. He made a lovely corpse, so lovely the artist Sir John Everett Millais came to do a deathbed drawing of him. Before he could begin, he needed to tie Dickens's mouth shut. Maybe Dickens had one more story to tell, or one more person to tell off. And again, we had talked about during the play why Marley's character has that bandage wrapped around his jaw. Okay, so that is going to be one of the questions you need to answer, is why did the author make this reference to Dickens's mouth? Okay, and then there's a little bit more information about manic depressive illness, also known as bipolar. It causes shifts in mood from one emotional state to another, and that can damage your life. Some of the symptoms are overly happy, and then unrealistic belief in one's abilities. The depressive symptoms, feeling no interest in anything, and this can last a lifetime. There's no cure, but there is medication that can help. And then down here, they're talking about cupping being more painful than leeching, and that basically it hurt a lot and could bleed too much, so it could be dangerous. And then there's a little box here that says cupping was perfectly safe, although sometimes it was followed by an annoying, if not fatal, bleeding. So that means, I believe, sometimes people would die from it. Okay, Dickens invented 13,143 different characters. Okay, and here's a few of their names. So they're definitely interesting. And we had looked at some of those in the brain pop. So the big question for this article is going to be, what is the author's tone of this article? How would you describe it? And what is the evidence to support that? So, for example, if you were saying this is a sarcastic toned article, what evidence is in the text to show that? Okay, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up, and don't be afraid to subscribe for updates. Thank you.